Joining me this evening is a member of the FBI, Charles Grady, who's a community outreach specialist. We'll get to that in a moment about what all that means. You're a New Haven boy.
I am.
Grew up, did all kinds of stuff, and let's just start, because you've got a resume like it's crazy. So you grew up in New Haven, a police officer in Hamden, narcotics trafficking, musician, soap operas, All My Children, Guiding Light, and then you have developed some programs about offenders. So why did you become a police officer? Let's start with that.
Well, it's kind of ironic because I grew up in a family of police officers, and I was determined not to become a police officer.
Why?
Just because I wanted to do something different. I thought I was going to try something a little different. My role models were all these pristine, well-adjusted, family men that, save the world every day. I wanted to do something a little bit more creative. So I was determined not to be a police officer, and you see how that turned out, right?
Yeah. So you become a police officer in Hamden.
Right.
How long a stretch was that?
So I actually did 21 years as a police officer in Hamden. I started out as a patrol officer and then became a motorcycle police officer. And it's kind of funny because I was the first African-American motorcycle police officer. And at the time, the television show Chips was popular. And so they used to call me Chocolate Chips.
Really?
Yeah, it was funny.
You took well to that.
I wore it proud. You know what? Being the first in anything, you have to sort of take what comes along. So.
Was there pride in that?
Yeah, for me it was pride. Again, my father, who was a captain, New Haven Police Department, he was the first among many, first in his role. So when I was the first to do certain things, I took a lot of pride in it. And again, you have to take some of the funny along with the great that happens being the first. So I did that for 21 years. I went and started doing narcotics. And then I was a detective for a while. I was assigned to Connecticut State Police Narcotics Squad for a while, a couple different times. Then assigned to the FBI Narcotic Task Force. So I was deputized by the FBI and the DEA, and also with the U.S. Marshal Service, all simultaneously doing drug work.
How do soap operas fit in here? Where did that happen?
So I can tell you this. The funny thing is when I talk to youth all the time, I say to them, listen, don't ever let your job define who you are and limit where you go with what you want to do. So at the whole time I was a police officer, I was a professional drummer. I was playing different nightclubs from here to Boston.
Do you still play?
I don't play anymore. But I could.
In your retirement, perhaps?
In my retirement, yeah, I could.
All right, so playing the drums, acting?
Yeah, and I decided I was going to take up acting. I had never done any school plays or anything like that growing up, but I decided, people said, oh, you look like so-and-so, you look like such and such, and I was like, all right, let me give it a shot. So I started auditioning. I actually got on a train in New Haven.
Were you still a cop at the time?
I was still a cop.
Okay.
And I decided I was going to try my hand at acting. And I immediately started getting some attention from casting directors in New York. So I did a few music videos and a few different things, and I loved it. And then the reality is that you have to know how to act. When I got an audition for a film called Malcolm X, and with Denzel Washington. And so I was an extra in the film, and I had a few small feature roles in there where you could see me. But the next role was they wanted me to read this entire script and learn this whole thing, and I didn't have the chops. So I went and started taking classes in New York for acting, and then picked up from there. I've been in a bunch of movies. I've met some of the greatest actors along. Yeah, Robert De Niro I met, and Denzel Washington I met, Steve Martin I met, Goldie Hawn. I've met a ton of people and done films with.
So you did classes, you were acting, you've got law enforcement in your background. Right. So you did that for a while. Now the FBI has pulled you back.
Well, so the funny part is that the whole time I was doing the acting thing, going back and forth to New York, developing a resume, getting small bit parts on soap operas and so forth, I was still working in New Haven doing, drug cases, long-term drug cases.
Talk about wearing two hats.
Yeah, and sometimes it was really, really fun because I would literally leave work in New Haven, shoot to Boston for a film and have my own little trailer, and they'd throw makeup on me and I'd go and do my little part, and then come back to my trailer, change, and go back to New Haven and go to work as a cop. So it was just the whole dichotomy of two different worlds was amazing for me. But again, being a drummer, being creative in my own way, no one ever told me I couldn't do all those things. So I just did them. I had a great time. And now I came back to the FBI because I retired in '02 from the Hamden Police Department, went to work in private industry doing corporate investigations for 6 years, then went to work at the U.S. Attorney's Office as an investigator. And then the FBI created this position called Community Outreach Specialist. I applied, and here I am.
What is it?
So the Community Outreach Specialist is pretty unique. New Haven's never had one, so again, I get to chalk up a
You're
first.
a trailblazer again.
I get to chalk up a first, and I'm okay with that. So the Community Outreach Specialist is a position that they have in other divisions across the country, whose primary responsibility is to get a pulse of the community and what's needed in the community to really, really show that the FBI needs to be engaged and is willing to be engaged in different aspects of the community. Our partnerships with law enforcement and community, as well as community leaders, is crucial to the advancement and the betterment of the FBI. We really, really have to change that image of, you know, we're the FBI, we're here, we're going to take over, step aside.
How did you learn that you had to change that image?
Well, I tell you, society tells you that that image creates distrust. And so one of the best ways to get the community to understand that there's really nothing nefarious about the FBI's role and job. We're here to protect and keep people safe. And so there's a multitude of ways that we go about it. So my job and my role, just like other community outreach specialists, is to make sure the community understands and knows what's real versus what's portrayed on TV. We're not those guys that are villains that come after people and hoard information and try to turn people on each other. We do enforce the laws, the federal laws. We work directly with local and state law enforcement. The partnerships are much greater now than ever in the past, and so that's how we succeed. At being a part of the community and working with law enforcement and community leaders.
So you have developed some programs
Yes.
that you're proud of.
Yes.
Let's
yes.
talk about those, because they're going to make a difference in society.
Yeah, I tell you, I'm most proud of the program called Future Law Enforcement Youth Academy, and it's FLAIA for short. And what it is we recruited 30 young individuals between the age of 15 and 18 that are high school age students.
Statewide or?
Statewide.
Okay.
So there's eight counties in Connecticut. So we intentionally wanted to make this as inclusive as we possibly could. We partnered with Yale University. The chief of Yale Police Department saw my vision. I walked to him along with the special agent in charge here in New Haven. We approached the chief and said, look, this is what we want to do. We need a partner. And what's unique about the FLAIA program is that we partner with Yale University. It's law enforcement education, and the youth that are chosen sleep on Yale University's campus for a full week in the summer and get classes from state, local, and federal law enforcement on everything from forensic science to cyber bullying to human trafficking.
Used as a recruitment tool?
It actually does turn out to be a recruitment tool, because what we're doing is we're actually trying to engage young people who have the idea that they might want to be involved in law enforcement down the road. We're giving them an opportunity to see behind the curtain and see what the law enforcement is, because sometimes someone might believe that, hey, I want to be a DEA agent, and then they find out what the FBI has to offer or what the U.S. Marshals offers, and they go, wow, that's a better fit for what I'm doing. So we are, again, very inclusive. We bring in state prosecutors, federal prosecutors. We have a litany of law enforcement professionals that come in and expose these youth to all the different options that they have for a law enforcement career. And so the program is so unique as a result of that we actually presented it down at the Special Agent in Charge conference nationwide, and other states are now going to replicate the program.
That you developed?
That we developed here.
So you should be very proud about that.
Right.
Law enforcement, when you first got into it and now, how has it changed?
Oh, night and day, night and day. And again, I think with everything, we develop as a society the more information we have. And the more educated we become, the better we are at getting tools to deal with some of the issues. Technology has been a friend and a major foe to law enforcement. And I don't even have to give examples of, video cameras
Sure.
working on behalf of law enforcement and against law enforcement. Some of it's a necessity, some of it's an evil. But the idea is that when I first came on in 1982, we in Hamden were busy. A busy night in Hamden was if you had 3 or 4 calls. where you had to actually go on a call for a complaint. Now, there's 3 or 4 calls backed up in any town like Hamden or anywhere else before you even start your shift. But law enforcement has advanced. I mean, just as technology has advanced, it's benefited us in a lot of ways. And as the bad guys, and I hate to use that term, the bad guys, because, you know, who are the bad guys? But as those that are breaking the law get advancements and move forward, our struggle is to keep up with them and make sure that we can get ahead of them in most areas and stop what they're doing. So there's some major changes that have come across in the past 30-something years in law enforcement. There was once this attitude of very militaristic movement in dealing with communities, but we realized early that the best cooperation, the best way to solve cases is to know the people in your community that you're policing and have an understanding. So there's nothing greater than a police officer or an agent who's familiar with the community in which they serve. And they can, if there's a problem with Johnny Ray, and they can say, hey, I know who Johnny Ray's mother is, I know the aunt, let me go find her, maybe she can bring Johnny Ray to the table, we can talk. That's the kind of policing that was done 50-something years ago, and now is starting to resurface, even with the technology. That's the way law enforcement has to be.
You're also working with people who have been incarcerated.
Absolutely.
And what are you doing there?
So the irony is that in my career, I put a lot of people in jail for breaking the law, primarily narcotic cases. I was running a program for the U.S. Attorney's Office and the City of Bridgeport called Project Longevity. During that, I started a program called Hang Time. And it was designed to give individuals coming home from incarceration a place to land, feel safe, feel as though they were part of something positive, and just to relax and spend time with their peers and have some mentoring going on. I have parole officers, I have police officers, I have judges, I have come to Hang Time and interact with individuals in some instances that are still wearing a monitoring bracelet. But they're there because they want to be. No one's mandated to be at this program. They come because they learn something. We give education. We have a series of educational...
Is this a state program? Is that how it's funded?
No, this is funded by private donation. And the program was founded by myself, but there's a whole volunteer staff that runs the program.
Should it be in other areas? It's just in Bridgeport, correct?
Right now, it's only in Bridgeport. There's hopes that it will, move on to New Haven and Hartford next, and Waterbury as well.
We've talked about so many things that you've done in your career.
Yeah.
What do you still want to do?
For me, it's all about bringing up that next generation of law enforcement. So what I'd like to do is spend a lot more time working with shaping the views and understanding and tolerance of young people that are going to pursue law enforcement. Because gone are the days when you can enter law enforcement with one view of who people are, the bad guys and so forth. The world has evolved in such a way that anyone going into law enforcement now has to have a greater understanding of human behavior.
How are you going to do that?
So get people involved young, early, and expose them to much. So I did a program recently called Community Cops and Culture, and we held it at Albertus Magnus. And I'm always looking for creative ways to get into people's heads to make them understand that, first of all, police don't grow on trees. They're not, coming out of a can someplace. These are someone's brother, sisters, mother, uncle, and the whole bit. So the idea of this program, Community Cops and Culture, was to bring community residents, leaders together from multi-faiths, multicultural backgrounds, and expose them to officers that are first-generation immigrants to this country, and made a concerted effort to become law enforcement and serve this community, because they had a real love for the United States, they had a real love for law enforcement, and wanted to make a difference. So we put together 11 different presenters from 7 different countries that spoke to their journey here to this country, and then also spoke about why they wanted to be in law enforcement. And it was just amazing to hear their stories and hear about their culture and hear about their country. And then within their presentation, in front of an audience of about 150 people, they spoke about what's most important to them about making a difference and a change, being first-generation immigrants in this country.
You're talking about tolerance, and we live in a country right now that is split right down the middle.
Absolutely.
So You in the FBI and as a former police department, what would you say to the nation that we need to do with law enforcement? I mean, you've done a lot of wonderful programs in the state of Connecticut. Now, how about you take that nationally? How would you do that?
So, first and foremost, what I would try to do is use proven track record. In order to show anyone what change looks like, you have to actually have a proven model. You have to bring someone and something along to say, this is what we've done, this is what works, this is what we can do on a grander scale. So the first thing I would try to do is bring some of those people who have had a change of heart in their tolerance. One such individual that we met recently at this Community Cops and Culture event was a reformed skinhead. He was a skinhead who was filled with hate. And he came and he presented and spoke about what turned him around. And as simply put, the respect and love of other individuals who he once hated turned his heart and made him understand that he needed to look at people as individuals. I tell all young people all the time when I talk to them is that we all make assessments and a judgment of people. We look at someone and we immediately make a judgment. I tell young people all the time, that's natural, that's normal. What you need to do is stop before you let that become your reality about someone else and allow that person to prove to you, dispel or prove that that's who they are. And once you do that, that's the first step in tolerance, is understanding I could have this all wrong. I could be looking at someone and think that they're a skinhead because they got tattoos up their neck or whatever, and never knowing that that individual might have been raised by an African-American family, and that individual has the greatest level of tolerance, but their visualization, I stereotype. I always tell people, give that person a chance to prove to you who they are.
Well, the one thing you haven't done on this list is politics. Is that in the future at all?
You know, I get asked all the time because I do love people, and I love rallying people around a great cause. I don't say never, but what I've come to realize is that where I am now, my boots on the ground, I oversee, I make sure things get done. I'm the kind of person that I like to finish what I start. That I don't like to talk it, I like to do it. So that's something that I've got to struggle with in the political world, because oftentimes politicians don't absolutely get a chance to follow things through. They have to rely on someone else to get it done. So I don't know. I mean, at this point, I've been approached a couple times by a couple different political arenas asking me.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah,
right?
I'm not necessarily.
So, Charles, as you look back on your life, and you were never going to be a law enforcement officer, and you were, and soap operas and music and community outreach and all of that other stuff. Right. Did you live the life you think you should have lived when you look at all this, or not? You
know what's amazing, Ann, is that I look back on my life, and I say this every day to everyone, no one's had a better career than me. And the reason I had a better, because I didn't have an expectation. I did not have a steadfast plan. So many young people today are under such crazy pressure. And we as adults, we make the mistake of saying to them, so what are you going to be when you graduate high school? What are you going to go to college for? And youth feel like they have to have an answer.
I always say it's okay if you don't know.
Exactly. And I say, so for me, my parents raised me. They never told me I couldn't do anything. So no one told me I couldn't be a professional drummer, an actor, and a cop at the same time. So I did it. And so I worked at doing things that interested me. And so that's the key to success. Doing the things that interest you, and ultimately everything in your life will fall together, things that interest you, as long as it's nothing criminal. And as long as you're moving forward, you'll be successful. And I really believe that, because most people that I know that I grew up with that had this, I'm going to be this and I'm going to be this by this age, their dreams didn't play out the way they wanted to. I always knew that I would have success. I didn't know exactly what way it was going to be in, but I also didn't relegate myself to one plan. I took life on. I went after life. I didn't let life happen to me. I went after it. And
what did you learn from being a police officer and in the FBI?
I'll tell you what I learned. What I learned is that when you have power and authority, if you don't use it correctly, you can ruin a lot of people's lives. When you have power and authority and you use it properly, and the betterment of human beings, you can make a world of difference. You can make a huge difference in anyone's life. I tell stories all the time of changes that I've seen in individuals. I've had individuals that I did a long-term drug case on and went away for federal prison for 8 years, come home and see me out at a restaurant with my wife and say, hey, if not for you, I'd probably be dead because I was doing the wrong thing. And you were fair and you treated me with dignity, even though I was doing the wrong thing. And so what you put out there comes back. So the key for me is to your answer is that, hey, listen, when you have authority and power, if you use that authority and power correctly, you will absolutely make a difference, not only in your life, in your family's life, but in the world. And so many people try to approach things in this grandiose fashion. And I've learned you start small, you make a difference as you move forward, as you go along, you take people and bring them up with you. So this program I run called Hang Time is the greatest example of that. We just celebrated 3 years in existence this past Friday, and it was amazing to hear the transformation in people because I believe in these people. I've long since gotten over that whole, we're the good guys, you're the bad guys. And when people talk that way, it just disturbs me because, you know, that guy or girl that you're calling bad, they have a mother, a sister, a brother, and they love that person, just like you have family that loves you. So you have to be really cognizant of, we're human beings. Some of our choices are bad, some of our choices are wrong, but even a clock is right.
I think you could be a therapist too, actually. I think you could do that. Charles Grady, Community Outreach Specialist with the FBI, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
And imparting your wisdom.
Listen, it's just my opinion. Thank you.
Spend all night kissing, and if one was right here, then who else is missing? Got a little sidetracked if I'm so wishing I find the keys to the door, but it's also a metaphor. Things to keep locked in the grocery store. The mind just to save time. I'll skip right ahead to the last ride.